Hi, welcome to the third entry in our walkthrough series. This time we're going to look at setting up our clients so that we can begin invoicing. As we move through this together, I'll give you some general hints and tips. I'll show you the best practices as well to make your life an absolute breeze when it comes to sending your invoices to your clients. And I'll give you an idea of some of the extra features as well. I might not necessarily be able to cover them all because there's quite a few, but I will do my absolute best. So let's jump straight in. And the first thing we're going to do is set up our clients. So you'll need to go to Sales and then jump to the Clients tab, as we can see here. Once you're here, you'll see a form like this. What you've basically got here is an overview of all of your clients, and these are people that you're charging for your services. I appreciate that this does say company name, but of course, if you are working with individuals, it's the same thing, so don't let that put you off at all. So in order for you to set up your own client, just go to the top right-hand corner and use this button here, New Client. Once you select this, you can begin to enter some of the information about your client. So again, as I mentioned before, I appreciate it says company details, but if you are working with individuals, it doesn't make a difference. So the first thing you're going to want to do is enter their name. Let's say, in this example, I'm going to work with Google. You can put a telephone number in if you want to. The only fields that are actually required, the rest are optional, are the fields in bold and marked with this asterisk here. You don't have to fill in all of them, just make sure that you are doing the ones in bold. The next required information is the default invoice currency. You can invoice in a handful of different currencies, as we can see, so you can do things like dollars, euros, and so on. By setting this, when you pick this client to invoice, your invoice will automatically be charged in that currency. I'll keep this as pound sterling for the sake of this exercise, but that's just a worth knowing bit of information. Payment terms, of course, how long are you giving that client to pay you for your service? Change this to whatever you like. Again, a couple of optional fields here with the email and website. Now the contact details, you'll need to press this button here and then begin to add the information of the person that you're sending the invoice to. You can add as many contacts as you like, just keep doing this. So let's say, for instance, that you do work with a large organization, but you end up working with different departments and they each have their own contacts that you need to invoice. You can keep adding as many as you want to this, and then they will all be housed under this one client, so you don't end up with loads of different clients that are basically the same. All I'm going to do now, and you can delete the lines, of course, using this red X over here. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to make up a name. I mean, there could be a John Smith at Google, don't know. The email field here is really important, so make sure that you get that right, because when it comes to invoicing, you can invoice directly through your account as well. And of course, you want to make sure that it goes to the right person. Telephone number you don't have to have. Again, role is just if you do end up working with different departments, feel free to enter it if you want. This box here, include an email. By setting this, when you do invoice, it's going to include this contact information on that invoice. If you end up with multiple and actually you need to send the invoice to multiple people at the same time, you can check all of the boxes and it will send the invoice to all of them. That's just worth knowing. Billing address, of course, is super important because this is where legally your invoice is going to be assigned. So make sure you get this right. Again, I'm going to completely make up an address on this occasion. I'm being very creative, as you can tell. This one again, sales invoice note, you don't have to add this, but it's worth bringing to your attention. If you want to add something like a thank you for your services note, or if you wanted to put your website, entirely up to you. You can put whatever you like in here. It is text only though, as it says here, so just be wary of that. Including the bank details, it probably goes without saying, but your client's going to need to know which account details to pay into. So just make sure this box is checked here. And then if you do have multiple bank accounts, you can specify which one you want to be paid into. Lastly is a late payment reminder. Now, this actually can be really helpful because it can save you time More importantly, it can actually save you having those sort of awkward chasing conversations if payments are overdue. This will actually automate the process of chasing your client for you. You can set an initial reminder, so once an invoice becomes overdue, let's say I wanted to do that on the second day of it being overdue, and then I can also send continual reminders thereafter as well. So let's say I wanted it to start on the second day after it becomes overdue, as specified here, but then I want continuous reminders every 2 days after that point as well. You can either just email it to yourself, or of course you can do it to yourself and the client, which probably makes a little bit more sense. So I'm going to press save now using this button down here. Aha, I didn't specify a bank account, so I'm eating my own words. There you go, got a bank account set. Okay, that's your client created then. That's it when it comes to setting up the client. So let's move on to invoicing now. So just go to sales and then invoices. You've got two options here. You can either go to the top right and press new invoice, or if this is your first invoice, you'll have this option here as well. Both do exactly the same, so it doesn't make a difference which one you press. I'm going to use this one in the top right though. Now, once I've selected that, I'm going to be taken to a form where I can begin entering the details of my invoice. So as we can see, as a quick scroll down, not too much information, but of course the important one is the invoice line item. So this is where you're going to begin to enter the details of your service and the cost as well. First of all though, you need to choose your client from this drop down menu. If they don't exist at this stage, don't worry, use this button, set them up, and then come back to invoices and you're good to go. I'll go ahead and just use the Google one we set up a moment ago. As you can see, as soon as I do that, the primary contact's listed alongside the lovely fake address that I made up as well. Invoice details, again, some of it's pre-populated based on the info that we used when setting up the client. So you'll see that it's chosen the currency for me. All I then need to do is pick the date that I'm going to issue the invoice to them. So you can type this in, you've got a calendar menu, or if you are just doing it day by day, you can just use this button instead. You might not necessarily need this because Crunch has got its own invoice numbering system. So because this is my first invoice that I'm raising, it's going to just show this invoice as number 1. If, however, you're using the invoicing system for things like self-billing or timesheets and you want to marry up the timesheet that you're given, you can type that in here as well. So let's just say you wanted to put something like that, or however it is that your timesheet or self-billing invoice shows up. PO number I won't go into too much detail on. This is just a purchase order. As it says, it's optional. Again, if you want to find out more, just jump onto the help center and we've got some articles there. Payment terms, you'll see that it's reflected what I set on the client. You can change it still though, it's not locked in. Similarly with the currency, you can change any of this at any stage as you raise the invoice. Invoice options, now this one's quite important because if, let's say, I wanted to charge somebody £1,000 for my service and then I wanted VAT to be added on top of that, if I then enter £1,000 for the service, using this option here and leaving this box unchecked means that £200 gets added on top of the £1,000. If, however, I wanted to raise an invoice that was inclusive of the VAT, again, let's use the timesheet or self-billing example. You get given an invoice, it's already got the VAT. You don't want to sit there and have to work out what the VAT element is. Check this box here, and then when you put your cost in, it will divide the VAT element for you. So just a handy little tip. I think maybe for most of us though, it's likely that we'll just leave this unchecked and allow the system to add the VAT on top. That is, of course, if you are registered. If you're not registered, your account's going to recognize that and it just simply won't let you add VAT on top of your services anyway. Okay, so I'll leave that alone for the time being. Detailed as well is worth knowing about before I move on actually. So you've got simple here, and you might notice that these change. So if I leave this as simple, all I'm going to do is add a description, a net amount, and then it will either add or won't add the VAT depending on whether I'm registered. That's quite nice and easy, that one. There's not much else to it. With detailed though, if you are charging by rate, hourly for example, check this box here and you'll see now that you've got an option to charge by rate and the quantity, which is the hours, plus of course the net as well, and the same VAT rules apply. I'm going to go back to simple though. Now to begin adding the invoice line items, just use this blue box here. Okay. This is where you enter a description of your service. Again, I'm going to be very creative here. Just put my services. Obviously, make yours a bit more complex than that. You might want to specify exactly what the job is. You might even have multiple different jobs for the same client, at which point you can add different line items by using this again. So if you wanted to separate what it is that you're doing, maybe you fixed a computer and charged one cost for that, and then maybe you fixed a network and you charged a different cost for that. That is possible as well. And it'll all then be self-contained on the same invoice as one lump sum cost. Obviously put the net in as well. So this is how much you're going to charge them. This as well, again, depends if you're VAT registered or not. It also depends on a number of factors like whether it's a charity, whether they're exempt from VAT, whether they're outside of the scope of VAT, so if they're overseas, for example. So this will automatically change for you based on information like that. Once you're happy, just press save. And again, I'll quickly show you, you can just keep adding those line items as well. If for any reason you needed to add a discount, you can. So if I was to put in 100, and again, here's my creative brain in action, it will then take off that money as well. If of course you want to delete, use the red X's. If you want to edit, use the edit pencil icon. You'll get a net total. Again, if there's VAT applicable, it will separate that element for you here, but then overall at the bottom, you've got your gross total as well. Once you're happy, move on down, and then you've got things like the notes. So again, if I had set one up on Google when I set them up as a client, that would appear here for me. Bank details has automatically been checked for me again because of the way I set them up originally. And then the late payment reminders as well. So again, you can still change any of this, don't get me wrong. Pick a new bank account, change the reminders if you want, take them off if you want to as well, entirely up to you. Lastly, you've got the ability to attach a PDF. So if you need to attach any supporting documents, whatever it may be, press the upload button, find the file, and you can attach that to the invoice as well. Now, at the bottom, you've got a couple of options. You can either save it as a draft or you can preview and issue it. Now, saving something as a draft means that you can make changes, you can use drafts for things like quotes or estimates if you need to as well. They're not legally binding documents at this stage while they're in draft. If you want to preview the document before making it official though, use this button here so you get a sort of final chance to double check it and make corrections if you need to. So I'm going to go ahead and use preview and issue. As you'll see, it says sales invoice created. Now, at this point, this is draft, okay? So this will give you a preview of what it's gonna look like. You can double check the info that's presented on it as well. But to the top right, you can either edit it if you do spot that there's a mistake or you need to make a change. You can issue it and email it directly to your client as well. So again, this is why it's important to enter the email address for the contact on the client. Or lastly, you could just issue the invoice without emailing it. Now, before I go ahead and issue, I'm going to do issue an email basically, but before I do that, I just want to explain what this option could be used for. So if you're backdating invoices, for example, and you don't necessarily need to send it back to anybody, you can just issue it on the system if you are just updating your bookkeeping records. If you'd rather download it and then send it by your own email address, like a Gmail or something, that's another possibility if you use this function. But if you are quite happy to use the inbuilt email, issue an email feature of your account, by all means use this option here instead. So I'm going to go ahead and press that now. Once we do that, you get the opportunity to select the contact. So if you end up with multiple, you'll have these check boxes here, so you can specify who you want it to go to and who it doesn't need to go to. The email subject you can change. This here is a dynamic field. So as I mentioned, the invoicing system will have its own prefixed numbers. So chances are this invoice number is going to be number 1. Your next one will be number 2. Feel free to obviously change this. It's completely up to you. Invoice content, email content, sorry, this is just what you want the email to say when you send the invoice to them. So, I mean, this will pre-populate with this as standard, obviously change this to be whatever you want it to be as well. That's it with issue an email. So I'm quite happy with this now. So I'm going to press send. You'll get a confirmation message at the top, and it will show you the invoice number. As I said, look, so it's gone to number 1, and it'll also confirm that it's been issued and sent to the client as well. Underneath over here, let me just quickly move myself now that we're done with the buttons at the top. Okay, so down here you've got what's called a status label. So this will highlight whether invoices are outstanding, such as this one, meaning that you're expecting money on it. It'll also change things like overdue. It'll also show you when it's been settled as well. You've got when it was issued, has it been sent, when's it due, who's the client, reference numbers, amounts, okay? That's it when it comes to invoicing in your Crunch account. I think the next thing that you'll probably need to know about is recording a client payment. So this is when you've actually been paid. Well, how do you mark up that an invoice has now been settled? Now, I don't want to keep you too long in this one video. Chances are anyway, you're going to be waiting for a little bit of time to receive the client payment, so you're not going to need to record it immediately. So the next entry in the walkthrough series will look at recording your client payments against your invoices. See you there.